Thanks so much to everyone for joining our webinar, where we'll be introducing our competition, Catalyzing Career and Technical Education Through Pay for Success. I'm Anna Fogel. I'm a director at Social Finance, and we are co-hosting this competition and this webinar with Jobs for the Future. Aimee Lloyd will also be presenting with me today. And Aimee, do you want to just say hi and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Aimee Lloyd. I'm an Associate Vice President here at Jobs for the Future. And just so you know, as the introductory slide said, all of the lines have been muted in order to eliminate background noise. And at the end of the slides, we're going to respond to any questions you may have. So many of you have already introduced yourself through the chat box feature. Thank you for doing so. Please be sure to familiarize yourself with the chat box feature so that you can ask questions throughout the presentation. Also, I wanted to let you know that we're recording this webinar and we're going to post it on the Pay for Success landing page, as well as a copy of the slides that we'll be going through today. So if you haven't introduced yourself, please do so through the chat box, and I will hand it back over to you, Anna.
Great. So in terms of the agenda for today's webinar, we're really hoping to cover all the information that applicants will need to apply to the competition. So as you can see on the slide, we'll first provide an overview of the opportunity and the Social Finance and Jobs for the Future partnership. And then we'll talk a little bit about Pay for Success and an overview for folks who might not know Pay for Success as well. And we'll then turn to the competition itself. We'll cover the goals, as well as some important details about the application process, eligibility, and dates. And we will leave time at the end for any questions, so feel free to enter those in the chat box during the presentation.
So Jobs for the Future is really honored to be partnering with Social Finance, awarded the first Department of Education Pay for Success grant, and leading the development of innovative funding models for high-quality career-focused education. So we're seeking applicants that are providing high-quality career-focused programming, CTE programming, ideally working in partnership with other local partners, including higher education, workforce development, business and industry, community-based organizations, to apply to become our nation's pioneering leaders in the education Pay for Success space. So eligible applicants include really the gamut. You know, we're looking for entities that are directly engaged in providing this kind of programming. So since this is a U.S. Department of Education funded initiative, we're going to consider Perkins eligible entities in our final rounds of consideration, but we encourage all interested entities to apply, including, you know, local schools, school districts, nonprofit organizations. So if you have any questions about eligibility in particular, please enter them in the chat box. And in terms of what we're looking to accomplish with this initiative, we're really looking to the field's development in CTE programming that improves students' college and career readiness and outcomes. So as a result, we're especially interested in applicants that propose an approach that is research and or evidence-based to improve high school graduation, enrollment in post-secondary programs of study, completion of post-secondary credentials, and family-sustaining employment and wages. So however you come at these problems of practice, those are the outcomes that we're seeking to accomplish through this initiative. The target population for this grant is really high-need, underserved youth populations. These populations include low-income students, underrepresented minority populations, first-generation college-goers. So we're really looking at how this proposed project will impact and serve these students. Now, the timeline is spelled out here. We're asking that interested entities please submit a letter of intent. It's not a requirement. However, it would be really useful on our end to determine the number of peer reviewers and readers that we need to provide. But the RFP was released on January 17th, and the applications are due on March 17th. Back to you, Anna.
Great, thanks so much. So we're just going to spend a few minutes providing an overview and introduction to social finance, and then Aimee will do the same for Jobs for the Future. So for those of you who aren't familiar with social finance, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we have a broad mission, which is to mobilize capital to drive social progress. And really core to our work is Pay for Success financing, or PSS. And we'll talk much more about this in a few minutes, but it's a public-private partnership with a performance-based contract at its core, and it's also synonymous with social impact bonds, which some of you guys may have heard about. And so in order to do this, social finance partners with governments, nonprofits, foundations, impact investors, financial institutions, as Aimee said, the whole gamut, to create innovative financing solutions to improve social outcomes. So we're based in Boston, and we have a few smaller offices in Austin and the Bay Area as well. And so just a little bit about our history. Our sister organization, Social Finance UK, developed the world's first ever social impact bond, or Pay for Success project, back in 2010, and it was at Peterborough Prison to reduce recidivism rates back to that prison. But since then, we've launched our first Pay for Success project in the U.S. in 2013, also focused on reducing recidivism to New York State's Department of Corrections. And we've launched a number of Pay for Success projects since then, covering a range of different social services and issue areas, and have about half a dozen or so more in development. And so on the next slide, you'll see sort of what we do and what services social finance provides. We really serve as an intermediary for Pay for Success. And so we think of ourselves as sitting sort of in the middle of Pay for Success projects, and we really support all phases of Pay for Success projects along this spectrum that you see on this slide. So in terms of on the far left, advisory services, we work with folks who are really in sort of early stage thinking about Pay for Success with jurisdictions, nonprofits, private funders to decide whether Pay for Success is a good fit for that jurisdiction or issue area. The bulk of our work is really around social investment, which you'll see in the middle of the slide, which is really about putting Pay for Success projects together, developing the projects, writing performance-based contracts, raising capital, and then we continue to stay involved in PFS projects once services have launched, which is what we call active performance management, to ensure that they're successful and hit the outcomes that all of the stakeholders agreed upon. And then just lastly, underlying really all of this is our work around field building and market education, which is really focused on growing the field overall, really beyond these specific projects. So that's a little bit about social finance, and I'll let Aimee introduce JFF.
Sure. Jobs for the Future is a national nonprofit organization. We have offices in Boston, Massachusetts, Oakland, California, and Washington, D.C., and our organization works to ensure that all young people and adult workers have the skills and credentials needed to succeed in our economy. We bring over 30 years of experience to the table, and our national reach extends across 40 states right now. We really help to develop and implement innovative and effective education and workforce development models. And as you see here, our vision is really aligned with what we're seeking to accomplish through this initiative, and that the promise of education and economic mobility is achieved for everyone. So this is why we care so much about this exciting opportunity, because we know that we're going to learn from your efforts in the field and ultimately lead to improved outcomes for young people. What we do, we focus on the education through workforce continuum, and we have three overarching goals as an organization around preparing for college and career, earning post-secondary credentials, and advancing careers and economic growth. And so you'll note that these goals also align with the indicators that we're seeking in this Pay for Success opportunity. How we work. We have expertise and experience in an array of education, both K-12, post-secondary, and workforce development, and we really work at the intersection of research, policy, and practice. We partner with the field to develop evidence-based innovations, including in career-focused education and CTE. We build the capacity of the field to implement what works, and we help to build systems in order to support, sustain, and scale what works. And then we also influence and advocate for effective policies. So we really want to think about how all of this intersects with career and technical education and career-focused education with respect to this initiative. So Anna, I will now hand it over to you to give a deeper dive into Pay for Success.
Great. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes going over what we mean when we say Pay for Success, and also to give sort of a brief primer for those of you who are considering applying but aren't as familiar with Pay for Success. And so the first point I want to make is that while Pay for Success really gets a lot of attention as a financing mechanism, the model of Pay for Success is really about what you see on this slide, about measurably improving the lives of people most in need by driving government resources towards more effective programming. And financing is really just a means to this end. And so you'll see when we talk about Pay for Success and the work we're talking about doing through this competition, you'll see it's really focused on the people, on the programs, and on scaling those programs. So on the next slide, you'll see that given this understanding of Pay for Success, it really positions Pay for Success at the intersection of these 4 powerful movements that you'll see on this slide. So the first we think of is really evidence-based policymaking, or what we call funding what works, which is ensuring that we're building strong evidence for programs that focus on understanding their impact on the outcomes that we care the most about. With government accountability, that our government dollars are going towards programs that are effective, that are serving people most in need, and that government's really able to measure and understand their impact of their budget decisions and their programming. Transformative scale, that we're able to mobilize funding and direct it to programs that are having the greatest impact on people, and that we can scale up those programs to reach people who will benefit from these programs. And then lastly, impact investing, that we can mobilize capital and attract new resources to address really difficult social problems. But so how does Pay for Success actually work? You'll see on this slide, we have a number of parties, but I'm going to have you focus just on the 3 main parties first in terms of understanding Pay for Success. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the outcomes payer, which is in the top left in dark blue, the service providers, which are in purple on the top right, and then the impact investors, which are on the bottom left in beige. And so Pay for Success projects are generally started by what we call an outcomes payer. It can be a government or a private payer, which identifies a policy priority or a costly social problem that's being faced by its community. And this priority really helps identify the outcomes which are the focus of a Pay for Success project, such as, for example, needing to improve high school graduation rates, let's say. And then service providers deliver high-quality services that are best suited for a target population. And so these providers deliver interventions which have strong evidence of their impact on the outcomes that have been identified by the payer and by the project, such as, evidence improving high school graduation rates for high-need underserved youth. And then the private funders come in to help provide the funding for these service providers to scale their services to an identified target population. And if these pre-identified outcomes are met, so let's say high school graduation rates are measurably improved for high-need underserved youth, the outcome payer will then, the outcome payer will then repay the private funders. And this means that the funders who provided that working capital to the service providers can recover some or all of their investment with a modest return. And I'm just using high school graduation here as an example, but there's lots of different outcomes that could be thought of for this competition and certainly in other issue areas.
Complicated grant.
So in addition to these 3 parties, there are a few other parties I just want to mention. So one is the intermediary, which is the role that social finance plays, which partners with the payers, with the service providers, and the funders to help structure and manage these projects. And the other is the independent evaluator. And you'll notice that in every Pay for Success project, there is this third-party evaluator who is really independent from all the other stakeholders and measures these predefined outcomes. And so these are really the main players in a Pay for Success project, and it gives you some sense of how these projects work, which is really just that you have an outcomes payer who agrees to pay for improved outcomes, a service provider who scales their services with the goal of improving those outcomes for a target population, and private funders who fund the upfront cost of these services and are repaid only if outcomes are achieved. And so when I was first introducing social finance, I said this is really a public-private partnership with a performance-based contract at its core. So that's really how you can think of it. And happy to answer more questions about Pay for Success towards the end of the webinar. So on the next slide, now that we have some sense of how Pay for Success works, I just wanted to give an overview of some of the Pay for Success projects that have already launched services in the U.S. So you'll see on this slide that there's 15 projects that have launched services across a range of issue areas, and they've raised more than $185 million in capital to support these projects. So just to give a few examples of what these projects look like, just again to sort of give folks a flavor of what these projects look like once services have launched, One example is last year, South Carolina launched a Pay for Success initiative with Nurse Family Partnership, who some of you may know. It's a nationwide evidence-based nurse home visiting program that serves low-income first-time moms to ensure they have access to high-quality prenatal and postnatal care. And this Pay for Success project is expanding their services statewide to an additional 3,000 moms, reaching across the entire state, including really reaching rural areas that didn't have access to this program before. And so this is just an example of a project that has launched, and we know that there really are dozens more of these that are in development. But you'll see if you look at the different issue areas that Pay for Success projects are addressing, that there aren't any projects providing services in the K-12 education space. And so we're really excited that this competition and our partnership with some of you all could really launch the first Pay for Success projects in the country focused on K-12 education or career and technical education. And so before I pass it back to JFF, I just want to spend a minute on the next slide and to just sort of remind folks of some of the reasons that we're so excited about Pay for Success as a model for expanding access to high-quality CTE programming. And I'll just run through these quickly, but Pay for Success really helps focus all parties on the outcomes that we care the most about and ensures that we're measuring those outcomes in a meaningful way. So we know if a program is working like as it's supposed to, and can also incorporate ongoing performance management and course corrections to ensure that it is successful. Pay for Success can help attract new private and public resources to scale up services that we know work and achieve better outcomes for individuals. And it also ensures that service providers have access to patient longer-term capital. Service providers and Pay for Success projects can sign contracts with access to capital over, 5 or 6 years that really helps them focus on scaling their programs and not having to fundraise. And it also helps government dollars go towards programs that work and ensures that governments know what they're getting for those dollars. Because in a Pay for Success project, like I was just explaining, governments really only pay if outcomes are achieved. So again, I'm happy to answer more questions on Pay for Success and how it works at the end of the webinar, but I'm going to turn it over to Aimee now to describe the competition in a little more detail.
Thanks so much, Anna. So catalyzing career and technical education through Pay for Success competition, that's just what we're seeking to do through this initiative. So on the next slide, we have an overview of the 2 phases of this work. One is focused on feasibility, and the other is on transaction structuring. So the overarching goal is to indeed expand high-quality career and technical education models. And in the first phase, we're going to select 4 CTE education providers to participate in these feasibility studies. And these entities will also receive programmatic technical assistance and support from JFF. And then for the next phase, up to 3 may then advance on to the actual Pay for Success transaction structuring. So on the next slide, we look at what we mean when we say high-quality career and technical education. So because we are grateful to be partnering with the U.S. Department of Education and its Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, these are the criteria that we're considering. So we want to support career pathways and in-demand industry sectors. These need to be connected to providing students with information about occupations in those sectors. We're looking at industry-recognized credentials and post-secondary certificates or degrees. We want to ensure that students engaged are learning really valuable skills that are transferable across industry sectors, including the foundational academic, employability skills, 21st century skills, as well as technical skills specific to the occupations that they're studying. We want students to be able to earn academic credit and post-secondary credit in these learning endeavors. And we want them to have real-world experience. So we want to make sure that students are engaged in some form of work-based learning. We also are looking to supplemental services and support services, and also, this may tie back to the 21st century, but really ensuring that students are gaining leadership skills through this endeavor as well. And, we recognize that you're on this webinar because you are already a leader in providing high-quality CTE, and there are many, many ways to do this. These are just a few examples from our experience and our time in the field, but please recognize that we look forward to learning from your experience and seek more than just this. But in order to address the quality criteria for providing post-secondary credit opportunities while in high school, we immediately thought of a body of work that JFF launched and leads in early college, in which the research base suggests that the tipping point for success, especially for high-need students, low-income and first-generation college goers, is 12 by 12 or 12 college credits by 12th grade. So ideally, for example, those would be a mix of both gatekeeper academic courses, which would be, college credit-bearing English and math courses, as well as technical courses aligned to a student's program of study, provided as dual enrollment to students. And, in its advanced form, early college high schools could also provide up to 2 years of college credit to students or have students simultaneously earn an associate's degree with a high school degree. And today, about a third of early college high schools are STEM or career-focused already with strong connections to CTE. And we know, just seeing from who's on this webinar, that many of you fall into that category. We also know research shows that students in early college graduate from high school at significantly higher rates than their peers. The majority earn college credit in high school, and they are much more likely to persist and complete post-secondary. So career academies are widespread across the country, most notably led by our friends at NAF, and they restructure large high schools into smaller learning communities, offer courses and activities connected to career or occupational themes, and require students to engage in the meaningful work-based learning experiences that we really seek to accomplish through this initiative. Career academies also have, a strong research base of demonstrable positive outcomes on improving the labor prospects of high-need and underserved students, and in increasing student sustained earnings after high school. And then linked learning, we know that many of you are also engaged in linked learning on this call. It launched in California by the James Irvine Foundation. It's an approach to secondary education with 4 core principles around rigorous academics, technical training, work-based learning, and comprehensive student supports. And so JFF is also connected to linked learning development, and we've been working across coalitions in K-12, post-secondary, business and industry, workforce, community-based orgs, and others in support of students' long-term college and career trajectories. So those are just some examples. Back to you, Anna.
So given this understanding of high-quality CTE programming, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the services that successful applicants would be awarded. And so this slide provides an overview of the key steps in developing, launching, and managing a Pay for Success project. And the activities that are outlined in that orange box, feasibility, capacity building, and development, are the ones that will be included and will be fully funded in this competition. So starting on the left side of the slide, in order to develop a PFS project or a Pay for Success project, we generally start with what we call a landscape study that helps identify particular issue areas or policy priorities to be targeted. But in this case, our projects have already identified the issue areas through this competition, career and technical education, and the policy priorities, improving academic and professional outcomes for high-need underserved youth. So our work with applicants who are selected will really start with feasibility, which is that bright orange chevron, second from the left. And we'll spend, 4 to 6 months really assessing the potential for using Pay for Success financing to address a specific issue in a particular geography. And once we complete feasibility and all of the project partners jointly decide that they're committed to moving forward with a Pay for Success project, we move into what we call project development, or sometimes you'll hear us describe it as transaction structuring, which can take anywhere from sort of 6 months on. And this includes all of the work needed to develop a Pay for Success project and then to launch services, which is what's included in that execution chevron all the way at the right, which is the important stuff, delivering services, managing to results. And so as I said, this competition and the work that will be provided through the competition is really focused on the boxes outlined in orange, the feasibility, the project development, and the capacity building as needed. And so in the next few slides, I'm just going to walk through what we mean by feasibility and by transaction structuring. So as you can see on this slide, these are really the main work streams that we focus on in assessing the feasibility and Pay for Success. And again, sites that are selected in this competition will receive a fully funded feasibility study on whether Pay for Success financing is a good fit for them. And we really take a collaborative approach to feasibility. We work really closely with our outcomes payers, our governments, our service providers throughout the whole process. So you'll see on the left-hand side column on the slide, we really start by identifying the target population to receive services, and we do this, using administrative data to really refine our understanding of the population that needs services and would most benefit. And so in this case, we are starting with a sort of broad definition of a target population, this group of high-need, underserved youth, but we'll really further refine that during feasibility. And as you move through the next few work streams, service providers, interventions, reviewing evidence, in this case, we're really looking to applicants to propose an intervention, building off of, Aimee's discussion of high-quality CTE models, and to provide details on the evidence behind that intervention and its potential impact. And as Aimee said, we're really eager to learn from you about different types of interventions. They don't have to be the ones that we've used as examples today. And as you move through the feasibility framework, in addition to really working closely with service providers to understand the intervention, to understand the evidence behind it, and the capacity to really scale services, we develop an initial cost-benefit analysis of the intervention and a financial model that really informs a pay-for-success project structure. And so this really builds off of administrative and programmatic data on the target population, the impact of the intervention, the cost of providing services, and then we really focus on gauging support from potential payers. And so at the end of the feasibility study, we really work with all of the project partners to develop a joint recommendation on whether or not to move forward with transaction structuring, which are really the activities that are listed on the slide that's up now. And so for up to 3 of the competitively selected sites, this is actually just the last slide, slide 24, we'll expect to move forward from feasibility to developing a pay-for-success project. And so the grant will include fully funding the feasibility study as well as developing a pay-for-success project all the way through launching services. And so you'll see these 8 main work streams in developing a pay-for-success project. And again, like in feasibility, we really work collaboratively with our partners to develop these projects. And so the specific list of activities in developing a project really can vary based on the need of different project partners. But I'm just going to walk through at a high level in general what's often included. So we often start with really fleshing out the project hypothesis, sort of the target population, who would we be serving, how big should this project be, where should it be in terms of geographies, what outcomes are we measuring. And then tasks sort of 3 through 8, economic modeling, evaluation, really represent the core of the time developing a pay-for-success project. So, it includes developing these economic and financial models, selecting an evaluator and developing an appropriate evaluation design, planning for project operations and scaling, drafting the pay-for-success contract, the performance-based contract, determining the financing structure and coordinating the capital raise, and finally ramping up and launching services, as well as continuing to manage project performance. So those are sort of the main work streams in both feasibility and putting a pay-for-success project together, and I hope that gave a little bit of a better sense of what would be included in the grant that would be awarded to folks. We also wanted to talk a little bit about what it'll look like from the applicant's perspective to participate in a feasibility study and ultimately in a pay-for-success project development. And so a feasibility study generally takes about 4 to 6 months, and it requires, it'll be led by social finance and jobs for the future, but really requires significant inputs from the service provider and from the project partners. So this can include things like programmatic data, administrative data, participating in site visits to really share information about the program, the landscape, as well as participating in regular working group meetings and sort of ongoing decision-making around the project. And then the next phase, the second phase around project development, can really take anywhere from, 6 to 18 months. So here on the slide we say 12 is sort of an average. And that timeline really depends on a number of factors, including the level of engagement from project partners. And again, this can include, sharing programmatic and administrative data, incorporating capacity building as needed, working through key decisions around operations planning, referral pipelines, evaluation methodology, and all the other sort of things that you can imagine that were included in the last few slides. And so what we've heard from our project partners is that it really is a great opportunity to learn how Pay for Success works, how to put a project together. You really get to know the other project parties in the community. But it is a real time commitment from each project partner. And so again, I'm happy to talk a little bit about what's included in feasibility and project development and answer any further questions at the end of the webinar. But I'm now going to turn it back to Aimee and JFF to talk a little more about how to actually apply.
Thank you, Anna. So as you see here, Social Finance and JFF are looking for applicants that meet the criteria that we've discussed. So we want to ensure that you are a provider of high-quality CTE, you have a track record of success, you serve the target population of high-need, underserved youth. We will have conversation about those entities that are eligible for Perkins funding. However, you won't be given competitive preference priority points. It's more just a point of consideration. And then we want you to apply with the support of potential outcomes payer. And Anna can talk a little bit more about that if you have questions about that. When we look at the application materials, we're really wanting to get as much information as we can from you, but also not have this be an overly onerous process. So it's one of these challenges where we want you to describe in detail what you're doing and how you intend to accomplish this within 20 to 30 pages with an executive summary, and then provide appendices that support the documentation in your proposal narrative. Our scoring criteria will be across these categories. So we're going to be looking at the project rationale, the partners and the policy context in which you're operating, payer engagement, program quality and pay for success elements, your capacity and commitment to this work, and the challenges and risks as you see them. So when you look across this, we've allocated points proportionally, which you can use to guide as you write these different sections within your proposals. And I won't go through all the details on this slide. We'll provide these slides afterwards, and all of this information is also in the RFP. So then back to the important dates. Again, the competition is open now. We would love for you to let us know if you're intending to apply via a letter of interest submitted. The deadline to submit questions is March 3rd, and we will submit answers to the questions on the website in an FAQ. And then the deadline to submit proposals is March 17th. We also are going to submit all of the answers to the questions that are asked on today's webinar on document on our website as well. So you'll be able to track all the questions that have been asked and the responses to them. Then in the end of April, on the 26th, we're going to announce our selections. So we've been tracking questions as they've arrived and want to take a look at some of them that have surfaced. So the first one, regarding eligibility, does local education agencies include 501c3 nonprofits that are working with schools, businesses, and other partners as an intermediary? The answer is yes. Well, the answer is that would not be a local education agency, but that would be an eligible applicant. So please, if you are a 501c3, if you are a nonprofit organization interested in this, working in partnership on high-quality CTE programming, absolutely, we would welcome your application. Another question, and Anna, this is really for you. As part of the application process, do we need to have payers lined up, or is that part of the feasibility study?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So what I would say is that we are hoping that applicants will have begun some of the conversations to bring together the partners that are needed in a Pay for Success project. And of course, one of the key partners in this is a payer. And so we are looking for applicants to have letters of support from potential payers. That's something that we'll certainly dig into more during feasibility, so you don't have to have a payer lined up and committed, but we'd love to be able to see a demonstration in the application that conversations have started and that there are potential payers who may be interested in participating in the feasibility phase.
Terrific. Here's another question. Is it acceptable to serve youth who have dropped out of high school ages 17 to 24, or must they be in school? And, we were talking about this earlier today. We would be very intrigued to read proposals from entities serving opportunity youth, those who are not in school and not working. So as long as you are providing, re-engagement strategies connected to high-quality CTE, absolutely, we would welcome that. Another related question is whether or not charter schools are eligible applicants, and the answer is yes, absolutely. Another question is a technical one with respect to this webinar. Yes, this webinar is being recorded. You can view it at your leisure. We will post it to our website, jff.org/payforsuccess. And we will also send out, in response to another question, we'll send out the slides and post those there as well. We have another applicant question. Could a proposal come from a collaboration of organizations working in 3 or 4 sites located across the state? That's a good question. I'm looking around at my team here, and I think so. The challenge would be ensuring that you have a focused enough intervention in high-quality career and technical education that it would be a unified body of work. But if you want to ask us more specifics about your particular proposal, feel free to reach out. We have 2 points of contact at our respective organizations, and we'd be happy to follow up with you through FAQs. Another question for you, Anna. In the past, have payers tended to be private businesses, government agencies, foundations, or all 3?
Yeah, so I would say that the payers that we're envisioning will likely be public entities as well as private payers, which could be, to the questioner's point, could be chambers of commerce or private employers. Foundations are often highly involved in Pay for Success projects. They are often involved as sort of the upfront investors rather than the outcomes payer, but we are really open to folks' partnerships and structures as they pull them together.
It's the role, not the, is
that they want, such as business to provide actual funding. I could be wrong, but
letter of interest to help what?
Potential.
Okay.
Okay.
So we are getting a little bit of background noise.
Can you hear us?
So there was another question related to the range of awards, and we just need to clarify that this is an RFP for feasibility study and transaction structuring for a Pay for Success model. So you will not be receiving direct funds for this. However, you will be receiving intensive technical assistance, and in addition to that, we really see this as an innovative, kind of forward-thinking way of thinking about sustainability and funding of educational programming, particularly CTE programming in this instance. So we're hoping to not only learn from the innovative best practices in CTE in the field, but also help you learn about creative funding models for Pay for Success implementation in your local programming. So I have another question around working with an evaluator. Should an applicant work with an evaluator at this point? And then also, should applications include an evaluator as a partner in the feasibility stage, or will social finance and JFF identify an external evaluator in phase 2?
So often evaluators are chosen in phase 2. So I guess the answer would be we are not looking for applicants to apply with evaluators. That's an entity that can be either competitively procured or sole sourced after feasibility and during the project development or transaction structuring phase.
So we have a question of the role of the payer and a letter of interest to help pay for participation in Pay for Success. Like, for the role of the payer, how do we substantiate their interest?
Yeah, so what I would say is that we are looking for potential payers to describe in the letter, sort of be able to demonstrate their understanding of pay for success, of, performance-based contracting, and that they are interested in ultimately paying for particular outcomes that are being described in the proposal. And so, I think there are a number of different ways that potential payers could demonstrate this interest, but we're really in the letters are looking for an understanding of pay for success, and in particular, that payers value the outcomes that the service providers are describing in the application. And so there isn't a form that we're providing folks because we think it really could look different, whether it's a private payer or, a state level payer or a city level payer, but we're really looking for, an indication of interest in acting as a payer in a pay for success project and an understanding what the outcomes are that the intervention may, improve upon.
Thanks, Anna. We have a number of questions related to entities that work across a region with either numerous school districts or numerous career centers or numerous schools, and whether or not, this either centralizing organization or regional approach would be eligible. And if eligible, would they need to include all CTE programming in the proposal or not? So if you're thinking about this from a broader perspective than just a single site or a single location or a single program, we would love to hear your thinking on this through a proposal. And you don't have to include everything that you're doing in CTE. Target whatever interventions you think hold the most promise in terms of the outcomes we're seeking with respect to, improving high school graduation, enrollment in post-secondary programs of study, completion of post-secondary credentials, and outcomes in employment and wages. And think about how you might do that on a regional level across different sites. We would welcome that proposal, absolutely. We have a question around if the applicant's CTE project or initiative is in development to be launched in the coming school year, would the applicant be eligible? And the answer is yes. We are asking that you substantiate your theory of change through this intervention based on either evidence and past history of success and or the research base for your intervention. So if you're launching something new, we just want to make sure that it's grounded in what we're seeking to accomplish, but yes, absolutely. What type of evidence is needed to ensure that program is effective and successful? Do you need a third-party evaluation or a randomized control trial? So we do not necessarily need a third-party evaluation or an RCT. Of course, if you have those, it is all the more valid and reliable data, but we would welcome whatever evidence that you feel tells your story, and also build off of the research and evidence base that's in practice that meets the What's Work clearinghouse standards of evidence and rigor. So both local qualitative and quantitative data that you've created and or any external research beyond your work or any third-party research related to your work would be welcomed. We have, would a standalone post-secondary program that works with students who have already completed high school be eligible? And the answer, again, is yes, because we are looking to the outcomes related to, enrollment and completion of post-secondary credentials, and then also, excuse me, also outcomes related to subsequent employment and wages. So yes, if you are providing high-quality CTE programming in post-secondary, please do submit a proposal. Must the applicant's project or initiative provide secondary and post-secondary credentialing, or is a secondary credential through the program sufficient? So because, again, we are looking to impact outcomes across this range of indicators, ideally it's one of these, the more the better. So if you're going to improve high school graduation and enrollment in post-secondary and maybe have a student complete a post-secondary credential or an industry-recognized credential in your work, that would be ideal. If you're only targeting one of those, we still would welcome your proposal. However, we are going to, in our criteria, be looking at kind of the evidence base or the research base towards all of these outcomes in our consideration. Here's one for you, Anna. Are we to identify the impact investors or the outcomes payers or both?
So we're asking that folks apply with a letter of support or letter of interest from the outcomes payer, but you're not you don't necessarily need to identify potential funders or impact investors. What I would say is if you already have a partnership in place and you know of local foundations or potential impact investors that are interested, we'd love to see that reflected in your application, and you could submit additional letters of support. But the only letter of support that is required or strongly suggested is a letter of support from the payer.
We have a question regarding the target audience in terms of what high need, underserved students means, and whether or not there's a minimum percentage of students that are eligible for free and reduced price meals that a district or a school might need to have in order to be eligible. We haven't set a minimum percentage. We want you to, in your proposal, describe the target population, and we are going to weigh the proposals that have larger percentages of students who are defined as high need or underserved. However, we haven't set a target percentage that you need to meet. So then those who submit the application should have already secured an outcome payer or payers on board with a commitment. Do they need to have a payer completely identified up front, committed 100%, Anna?
Thanks, Amy. So again, we'd love to see that conversations have been started with potential payers. So we're looking for a letter of support, but this does not mean that you need to have a payer or even multiple payers 100% confirmed or signed on, but it's something that we will work together on during feasibility.
So here's one with respect to tax grantees that have consortiums within states and across state lines that are pre-existing, and whether that sort of consortium that has colleges that are doing related work to this in partnership with K-12 would be encouraged to apply as a sustainability possibility. And I think absolutely, just as previously we talked about, whether you're working at a regional level or, multiple site level, this kind of consortium that would span state lines would be very interesting to consider. I think you come up with different policy challenges when you're working across states, but we would love to learn from you and find a way to connect you to this work. What is the cap age on youth, 15 to 24-year-olds? And I think we're looking at high school through post-secondary, with 24 being, the outer range of youth. So, yes. Some high school students may be younger than 15, but yes, that's the range we're considering. There's a question that we've talked about rates of completion of secondary and post-secondary programs as well as employment and wages as key outcomes. Are there other less directly education-related outcomes that we expect to form the basis of cost-benefit analysis and repayment structures? Anna?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that question?
Sure. That the key outcomes that we've talked about on this webinar relate to education with respect to secondary and post-secondary completion, in addition to employment and wages. Are there any other less education-related outcomes that we expect that would form the basis of cost-benefit analyses and repayment structures?
Sure, thanks for repeating that. I would say yes. I think that with many of our cost-benefit analyses, we really think broadly about the value that programs are creating. And so while the outcomes that we've identified are really focused around academic and professional success, so we mentioned high school graduation, we mentioned post-secondary achievement, credentialing, increased wages and employment rates. You could also think of, interim indicators that are correlated with any of those longer-term outcomes. And so you could imagine increasing achievement in, lower grades in secondary and high school, for example, as something that is highly correlated with high school graduation or even, later post-secondary outcomes.
Thank you, Anna. I have another question around the kind of program. Could a proven program that begins in elementary or middle school and continues through high school be considered? And the way we're thinking about this, because the outcomes really are secondary focused, and with high school graduation as being one of the key ones, I would encourage you to focus on the secondary space, which could also include middle school to high school. I think backing up to elementary, it's wonderful if you have a program that starts in elementary and spans the K-12 continuum, but we really are focusing on the secondary engagement piece for this. And then, do we have any expectations or guidelines about the number of youth served by an applicant's program? So one thing that we should say explicitly is that we are looking to explore a wide range of approaches to this work. So considerations such as rural implementation versus urban implementation, different approaches to high-quality CTE. Like, we want to have a portfolio that encompasses a lot of different approaches, which means that, you know, we know in rural areas you would not have the same concentration of students. So we're not looking at a specific number of students to be served. We are looking at, you know, the quality of the programming and the target populations that you will be serving, but we recognize that, you know, not everybody is an urban school district that has, you know, high schools with 4,000 students in them. I'm looking for other questions. Are there others that I need to respond to? And I should mention again, as we're scanning through, we've been receiving lots of chat box questions from you. Please be sure to continue entering them if you want. Many of them are duplicates, which is why we're trying to roll up questions, but we have a recorded document of all the questions that have come in, and we will respond to all, post all the questions and respond to all the questions on our website. So I'm looking, I think, yep, we did that one. All right. Thank you for all of these really wonderful questions. There is another one. Will there be another round of feasibility studies or implementation grants beyond this RFP? Anna, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. What I would say is that we are hosting this open and fair competition now and plan to select 4 applicants to receive feasibility and transaction structuring, but we will leave open the possibility that if we don't select 4 in this round, we could host a second competition. However, if you're interested, I would encourage you to apply at this stage, because if we select 4 applicants in this round, we won't host another open competition.
So can you please clarify if the entities such as businesses are those providing the actual funding? So maybe just say a little bit more about like the payer relationship, Anna, just one more time to describe how this is structured.
Yeah, of course. And I realize that this is the least familiar part of Pay for Success projects, is the role of the outcome payer in contrast to the role of the private funders. So I'll just describe it one more time and then can talk a little bit about the role of a private payer. And so just to reiterate, you have generally the way these projects are structured is you have someone who we refer to as an outcomes payer. And that means folks who have a policy priority that aligns with the impact of the proposed intervention, such as you know, improving high school graduation or improving credentialing around a particular sector. And these entities, either public or private, will only pay for those outcomes as they're achieved. And so in order to cover the cost of expanding services, you have private funders who come in and who cover the cost of those services. So either way, the service provider or intervention provider receives fully their costs reimbursed. However, the outcomes payer agrees to repay the private investors only if outcomes are achieved. And so, for example, you could imagine a Department of Education or a city school district agreeing to pay for improved outcomes, especially if they were related to academic achievement. On the other hand, you could also imagine private sector employers or networks of employers who would be interested in paying for outcomes, especially if those outcomes were targeting credentials or, in particular, you know, preparing the pipeline of highly qualified future employees. And I'll just say one more thing, that if folks still have questions about the role of the payer, please let us know. As Aimee noted, Leighton and Alex will be the contacts at Jobs for the Future and Social Finance respectively, and we're happy to continue trying to flesh this out and clarify the relationship between the different parties.
Great. So I think, I'm scanning through the final questions that we have. I think they're mostly duplicates. However, again, we will post all of these questions and we will provide written responses to these questions on our website. And the slide that we have up right now has the website link on it. It's jff.org/pay4success is the landing page for all the materials related to this initiative. And we will provide FAQs, the contact information for both Alex and Leighton, who are the respective points of contact for social finance and Job for the Future, are there. And we will ensure that all the slides are posted there, as well as a recorded version of this webinar. We will email you because we have your email addresses from having logged on to the webinar to let you know when all the materials are there. So expect to hear a follow-up email from us probably Monday. And if you have any further questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to Leighton or Alex. And any one of us would be, happy to correspond with you, but also for transparency and fair and open competition, we will post all questions and all answers publicly available on our website. So on that note, Anna, any final words?
No, thanks so much to everyone for participating and for these great questions, and we're eager to continue hearing from you as you prepare your applications.
Well, we are very glad to be partnering with you, Social Finance, and very excited to learn from all the folks on the webinar about what your approaches to high-quality CTE programming are, how you're thinking about this innovative pay-for-success approach. I mean, really being the first ever education pay-for-success initiative in the nation is really an exciting opportunity for us all, and I know that we're going to learn a lot from this process. So thanks, everyone, and we look forward to being in touch again soon.